So, does God exist? Let's ask St. Anselm, who was writing in about the 12th century, and he was the Archbishop of Canterbury. And when we think of the question of God's existence, a lot of times when we approach that, we're coming at it with a very logical approach. We're thinking about it in very logical terms. And a lot of times when you see this question of God's existence, it's a lot of times between a Christian and a non Christian in a debate type format. But Anselm isn't in a debate, he is in a devotional. And so it's better to think of Anselm's what's been called the ontological argument for God's existence, not as a proof, but as a prayer. Because at the very beginning of the Proslogion, which is the book where we find this argument, he is praying to God and he says, God, I don't want to understand you so that I can essentially believe in you, but I believe in order to understand. There's a huge difference between those because a lot of the ways that we've seen arguments for God's existence, people say, okay, I'm going to give you something to understand. And once that makes sense for you, then you can go ahead and believe in God's existence. But Anselm is approaching this differently. He is saying, I believe in you, and now I want to understand what it is that I am believing. And that is the starting point. And then he moves on and he starts to reflect on God, reflect on who God is. And he says, God, I understand that you are something than which nothing greater can be conceived. Something than which nothing greater can be conceived. Now, a lot of people are going to say that's really confusing, which it might be. But he says, okay, that's my definition of God. And then he's going to say, well, why is it that the Bible talks about a fool who says in his heart, there is no God? And he starts to think about that and he says, well, let's see. God is than that which nothing greater can be conceived is sort of like an analytic statement. Now, an analytic statement is something that is true by definition. It has the definition built into the statement or the sentence. So you could say a bachelor is an unmarried man, or you could say a triangle is a three-sided figure. Those are analytic statements. Their definitions are built into them. So when Anselm says God is something than which nothing greater can be conceived, he is saying that is almost like saying a bachelor is an unmarried man or a triangle is a three-sided figure. And so what he's going to do then is he's going to say, well, if you deny one of the qualities or the properties of a bachelor, if you say that a bachelor is a married man, well, that would be foolish because you are denying one of the properties, which is unmarriedness. Or if you say a triangle is a four-sided figure, that would be foolish because you are denying one of the properties of a triangle, which is being a three-sided figure. And in the same way, he's saying, well, let's think about this definition, something than which nothing greater can be conceived. Well, it's going to have properties, just like a bachelor has properties of male and unmarried, and just as a triangle has a property of three-sidedness, you're also going to have all these properties in that definition of God. And so he's going to say, well, this, in fact, later he reflects as well, God is going to be merciful, he's going to be powerful, and all of these properties exist within that definition of something than which nothing greater could be conceived. And so he's going to say, well, one of those properties is going to have to be existence, because existence is better than non-existence. So, for example, you could think of, let's say, transportation. Let's say that you're going to compare a, a flying car to a bicycle, and you're going to ask which of these is better. Is a flying car better than a bicycle? Well, a flying car is probably faster than a bicycle. A flying car is much cooler than a bicycle. A flying car can maybe go farther than a bicycle. A flying car might have a lot of properties that make it better than a bicycle. But the problem is flying cars don't exist. And so if you are to look at which is better for someone who wants to actually use transportation, get from point A to point B, the bicycle is going to be better because it exists. And so you can see existence makes something better. And so he's looking at this and saying, well, of all the properties that are built into this question of God, existence is going to have to be one of those, because if this something than which nothing greater can be conceived did not exist, well, we could actually conceive of something better that does exist. And so he's what he does there then is he's going to say, just as it's foolish to say a bachelor is a married woman or a triangle is a four-sided figure, he's going to say that it is just as foolish to say God does not exist, because you're denying one of the essential properties of something than which nothing greater can be conceived. So built on that, he's going to say, if you have that definition of your head, you have to say he exists, which means it would be foolish to say he doesn't exist. Now, what do people think of this argument? Well, a lot of people, again, they're not crazy about it. They're going to say, well, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because I can think of, the best cheeseburger, and the best cheeseburger has 4 slices of bacon, but I can imagine that one even better would have 6 slices of bacon, maybe something like that. And so is this convincing to people? Maybe not. But this argument or this proof or this idea is not meant for everybody. This idea is meant for believers. This is meant for somebody who is believing in order to understand. So this argument's not really made for outsiders. It's not made to be used in a debate to convince people. It is made simply as a part of a prayer, a part of a devotional, where we are reflecting on who God is. And part of that reflection is, if he is greater, if he is that thing that nothing greater can be conceived, then he must exist. So whether you buy that or not, it's up to you. And if you're not a believer, it probably won't make any sense. But if you are a believer, it's a pretty cool argument, I think.